We've all heard the phrase YOLO, you only live once, but have you ever heard of the phrase Yalt, you actually live twice? Well, here on the Yalt Podcast, we're going to unpack some of life's most relatable topics through interviews, lived experiences, all while answering the question, so what if you could actually live twice? And I'm your host, Jaimee Lombard, and as a follower of Jesus, I believe that we actually do get the chance to live twice, and that this view could radically change how we live and perceive the world around us. So whether you're a follower of Jesus, exploring faith, or just interested in hearing different perspectives, I hope you'll stick around and chat with us. Welcome to the Yalt Podcast. Hello. Happy New Year and happy new pod. Welcome to the first ever episode of the Yalt Podcast. While we're on the topic, I would love to get your take on how long you think it's socially acceptable to say Happy New Year. Because in all honesty, I'm recording this and it's probably going to be posted at some point in February, which I feel like in all standards, that's like a little late to be saying Happy New Year. But why is that? Why do we not want to say Happy New Year and wish people a happy year midway through the year? Because if we're all honest, I feel like we lose some of the joy and the hope that we started out with in January halfway through the year. So maybe we should be saying it all year round. Just saying. I don't know. Wanting to know your thoughts on that. But anyway, I am your host, Jaimee Lombard, and I am so excited to be kicking off the podcast with a first episode, a solo episode by yours truly to tell you a little bit more about myself and why we're starting a podcast. So before I jump in, if you like today's episode and you want to stick around and hear more from me and my lovely future guests, then you can find me at the Yalt_podcast on Instagram. You can also hopefully find us on all major streaming platforms. But considering I haven't actually began the process of uploading a recording yet, we're going to see how that goes. But fingers crossed, wishful thinking, hopeful thinking, all major streaming platforms, you can catch us there. So before we jump into anything else, it only seems fair to tell you a little bit more about who is going to be talking at you for the remainder of the episode, which, spoiler alert, is me. So, background on myself, I used to work in corporate sales, and anytime we had a presentation, specifically more of a sales presentation, we would start with something called an executive summary. And if you're not in corporate America, you've never heard that term before, I'm here to tell you that it's basically a small segment at the beginning of the presentation. It's probably like, I don't know how many slides, a few slides at the beginning to tell you a summary of basically who is presenting, whether it was an individual or a team or the company itself. It would tell you a little bit about our experience, again, either as a team, as a company, and then it would mostly tell you why it mattered to the client that we were here, why it mattered that we were presenting on this specific topic, and basically why they should go with us as their partner and go with us for the project. And so I figured, what better way to kick off the podcast than using the same structure? If it works to sell millions and millions of dollars in deals, then it probably also could work for a podcast too. So we're going to find out together, So to tell you a little bit more about who is presenting, I am a 29-year-old single girl who is originally from Ohio, but I now live in downtown Chicago. I love Jesus. I love the city. I love doing anything creative. I am a big foodie, so I love trying new restaurants. And over the last 6 or so years, I've come to really like volleyball. And I also, over the last few years, have come to really enjoy cycling. I did my first ever triathlon in 2023. And I'm here to just say, I am the first to say, actually, that I never thought I would do a triathlon. I have had friends that have done it almost every year for the last 7 or so years, and they used to tell me year after year, just do it with us. Just do the relay. You can only do part of it. You do part of it. And every single time I said, not my thing, not for me. You're not going to catch me out there. I would rather die. Well, turns out things can change. Your perspective can change. And I actually decided to try it. I just thought, why not me? I can do that. So I'm here to tell you, you can do it. It was actually a ton of fun. Would highly recommend. Would also recommend maybe a little bit more training. I definitely have some lessons learned. I actually wrote a LinkedIn article about my lessons learned. So if you want to check that out, it's out there on my LinkedIn. Small plug, I guess, for my LinkedIn. But but yeah, after the triathlon in 2023, I did finish it. I've taken over the last year plus to recover, if I'm honest. My body did not handle it super well, but it was a lot of fun regardless, and I learned a lot along the way. But one thing I really came away with was a love for cycling. I bought a bike specifically for the triathlon, and I have loved that thing ever since. I take it along the bike path here in Chicago, along the lake, and it's one of my favorite activities in the spring, summer, fall. So that's something that I really love. Something else that I really love, if you know me already, then you already know that I love to sing. I actually grew up in almost every single choir my school had to offer. At one point, I was choir president, so I was really there for the choir. And I actually went as far as to almost go to school for vocal performance. I feel like they always tell you when you're young to do something that you love, do something that doesn't feel like work. And for me, the only thing I could think of at the time was music, because almost half of my 7 periods in a school day were choir. And if I had a choice to do something after school, likely I was playing piano, singing, starting a YouTube channel, you name it. So I naturally thought, you know what, I'll just go to school for vocal performance. So I was researching schools like Juilliard, etc., to try and pursue that as a career. In the meantime, I also went as far as to audition for American Idol because, again, I wanted to sing. I thought I could be the next American Idol, so I'm going to go out there. And I did. I auditioned for American Idol. The process was very long. It was a very long day. And I'm here to tell you, spoiler alert, that I am not an American Idol. I did not win. I didn't even make it on the show, if I'm honest. So thankfully, there are no videos that can be used for blackmail of me at 15 and a half singing at American Idol. There are pictures, and to be honest, looking back at the outfit, just the outfit alone, right? There's no videos, so I don't know how I sounded, which thankfully, but even the outfit alone, right? I was like, yikes, big yikes. So, you know what? It's probably for the best that that dream died there. And so between that, and people kept asking me, you know, what I wanted to do with a vocal performance degree. And I just didn't have the answer, if I'm honest. So between not having the answer to that question and not making it on American Idol, I just decided, you know what, this might not be for me. I'm just going to set this down, let it be a hobby. And instead, I went to Ohio State and I studied business. So a very strong left turn, but here we are. So my vocal talents and love for singing is now only reserved for singing at church, which fills me with so much joy, and I love doing it. But yeah, that dream died pretty early on. Thankfully, I didn't waste any money in college doing that. I don't want to say the word waste. It probably wouldn't have been a waste, but I'm glad I came to that conclusion prior to spending money on it, deciding that maybe that wasn't what I wanted to do. So anyway, as somebody who studied business, one of the things that maybe other majors do this as well, but one of the things that we did when I studied business was take a bunch of personality tests and strengths tests. And one of them, I think back then, was the Strengths Finder. I think now it's called Clifton Strengths Finder, something in that realm. But I remember on the test that I scored highest as futuristic. And so that is one of my biggest skill sets as a person is I love to look towards the future, which can be a pro and a con, but I'm very good at creating a future vision for something and getting other people really excited about a future vision. But even though I am good at creating a future vision, I'm here to also say that my literal vision, my eyesight, could not be further from that. It's actually so bad that I'm almost legally blind. I know you can't tell at the moment. If you look a little closely, you could probably see my contacts. But I'm here to tell you, even with the contacts, it's still not great. It's still not perfect. There are definitely things that I still cannot see, and that will probably be the case for me until I die, to be honest. So sad, but I'm also here to tell you, if you've never heard this before, I didn't know this until I had my own experience. So I'm just here to say that if your eyesight is really bad and you have hopes of getting LASIK eye surgery, just like I did my whole life for probably like 18 years, I was like, don't worry, I'm just going to go get LASIK. I'm just going to wait until the point where my eyesight just stops changing, and then I'm going to go get LASIK. I'm going to fix it. I'll never have to worry about it again. My dad had LASIK. He raved about it. So I just thought, no big deal. A couple lasers, we're going to be good to go. You know? That's not always the case for everybody. That's what I'm here to say. Because I was rudely and sadly mistaken. I walked into that surgeon's office feeling very hopeful and very excited, and they took one look at my prescription and my eyesight, and they said, sorry, girl, too risky for us. We're not going to do it. We are afraid that we're going to hurt you, ruin your eyesight forever, so we won't even touch it. And so I walked out of that office feeling very not so hopeful. Definitely not hopeful anymore. Definitely in tears, and definitely very sad because my dreams of fixing my eyesight had just come to a crash. And I still go to the eye doctor, of course, to get my eyes checked. And every single year, I ask the question, have we made any improvements on our technology that would allow me, as almost legally blind, to get my eyesight corrected? And the answer, my friends, is still no. So, catch me wearing contacts/glasses for the foreseeable future. People are always shocked that I have glasses because I never wear them. When I was younger, I used to wear my glasses all the time before I started wearing contacts. And kids are so weird. I got bullied for wearing glasses because they were so thick. And everyone was like, oh my gosh, your glasses are so thick. You must be so blind. Like, yes. That's what that means, unfortunately. And then the next question is, can I try them on? Can I try on your glasses? Then they would try them on. Then it would probably hurt them. And they would laugh because they were like, oh my gosh, you really are that blind. I'm like, yeah, yes, I am. So anyway, it was not so much embarrassing, but more so annoying. So once I started wearing contacts, I was just like, never again. Never again. I'm not doing it. So I rarely wear my glasses outside of the house, mostly because I don't love people asking about it. I don't love that they are super thick. They also kind of hurt your face because they're heavy and they sit on your nose. You also can't really see as well. Anyway, all this is honestly an entire other episode. So maybe we'll make another one about eyesight, and we can bring on some other almost legally blind friends to talk about challenges. But anyway, besides the point, I have poor vision. That was the point of that. Also, speaking of personality tests, I also score highest as a type 1 wing 2 on the Enneagram, which means I love people, and I also, unfortunately, love perfection. But I'm here to also say that I am very far from perfect, and I have had to learn the hard way that is something that is not an awesome quality to have, and something that I have had to spend over the last year to try and undo, and we are probably not even close to undoing it. I used to think that having anxiety over picking a nail polish color, literally a decision that has almost no impact, right? There's no consequences if you pick the wrong color. There's also no perfect color, first of all. But I used to think it was normal to really stress over picking a nail polish color until I realized that's because my brain was trying to look for the perfect answer, and there's not a perfect answer, which would send me into an anxious spiral. And that is something, my friends, that is learned and not just a trait that you are born with. So I am trying to unlearn it for the betterment of myself and those around me, specifically my nail tech, but also it applies to everything. So anyway, I am type 1 wing 2 on the Enneagram. Also, for myself, majority of my family comes from, or lineage dates back to, being Italian. And even though I'm Italian, mostly Italian anyway, I still somehow get mislabeled or misidentified by people that I've never met, don't even know. They often think that I'm Hispanic. And it has now become an inside joke with most people because I do not understand. I'm not sure. I don't know. I've been told by other friends who are Hispanic that I do not look Hispanic, that I very much so look Italian or something else, but not Hispanic. But you know what? I am happy to be mislabeled as a part of the Hispanic community, happy to be tag teamed as a member, but that is not the case, unfortunately, as far as my family lineage is concerned. But because I'm Italian, or mostly Italian, I grew up mostly eating pasta. That was like the Sunday family meal. Honestly, it's probably the meal at other points in the week as well, but I can really remember it on Sundays having family dinner. My grandparents would make homemade cavatelli, which if you don't know what that is, look it up. It's like little rolls of pasta. So good. I remember being like 10 years old and writing down the recipe from my grandparents, and I don't know where that went, but I wish that I did because they're sadly no longer living. And so I can't get it from the source anymore. But I remember knowing that it was something special and I was going to need that for the future, but I don't know where it went. So, so maybe it's for the best, honestly, because eating pasta for a lot of my life did not do my body any favors. And to be honest, I have spent a lot of time, energy, money trying to undo partially that, but like other not so awesome habits and traits as well on top of pasta, you know? So anyway, it's probably for the best that we lost the recipe because I probably don't need to be making that, eating that regularly, etc. But my favorite food will forever be chicken parm. So if you catch me at a restaurant and that's on the menu, 9 times out of 10, that's what I will order. I'm very predictable. So just so you know. Lastly, I love deep conversations just as much as I love to laugh. And maybe you've gotten a little bit of that in the episode already, but both of those things are true, which makes for a lot of fun, but it also makes for very long voice memo conversations. So if you know, you know, if you get a voice memo from me, the chances are very high that the voice memo will be 20 minutes or longer. So I always apologize in advance. I always say I'm going to try and be more concise, but when it comes down to it, I have a lot to say. I have a lot to say, and it all somehow just flows out of me, and I can't help it. So I'm so sorry. That's why I need to start a podcast. So before we even get to the section on why it matters and why I'm starting a podcast, just know that that's one of the reasons. And my friends are still going to give voice memos, but they'll be really excited to know that I have another outlet to share my thoughts. So that way it doesn't clutter up their phone. So anyway, moving on to the next piece of the executive summary is my experience or my credentials in my life. And something that I'm very experienced in is being an only child to divorced parents. I obviously grew up and still am an only child with divorced parents. And so I grew up mostly alone, spending time alone, and that made for an experience of having to create fun and being really good at creating entertainment from absolutely thin air. And so I'm really good at being by myself. I'm really good at spending time alone, entertaining myself alone, and I'm very good at finding fun wherever I am. Whether it's catching frogs in the ravine, I used to do that across the street when I was younger by myself. I would just go over to the little ravine, catch little toads, and I thought it was so fun. Or, you know how you play like horse or pig? I don't actually know what is the actual name of the game. I feel like people just pick random words. You know the basketball game where you like spell out the word? Like what's the actual name of the game called? Do we know? Or am I just stupid? I don't know. Anyway, I used to play that by myself, just in the driveway with a basketball and a hoop. How do you play that by yourself? I don't know. I would just keep shooting the basketball and trying to make shots. And anytime I made a shot, I added a letter. And, you know, and then you win. I think that's how the game works. I don't even remember, but I just remember playing it by myself. If that's not how the game works, don't tell me. It's okay. We can talk about it later, you know? So anyway, I used to do that by myself. I was talking to somebody recently who is also an only child, and somehow we got on the topic of rolling coins or like putting coins into one of those like cardboard-esque rolls that you would take to the bank to deposit coins. And I remember like really we were raving. We were like, oh my gosh, we used to do that when we were younger. It was so fun. Like you had to organize the coins and put them in the little roll. And I just remember everybody else standing around us was just blinking at us. Like, what are you talking about? What are you saying? What do you mean? Putting coins into a roll? First of all, they didn't even know what that meant. Second of all, they were like, why was that fun? And I think we deduced that we were both only children. Therefore, we probably just thought it was fun because we didn't have anything else to do or anybody else to do anything with. So we were like, heck yeah, that was a lot of fun. So anyway, all that to say is I'm really experienced at being an only child, two divorced parents, which means I'm also really experienced at creating fun and entertainment by myself out of nothing. So I'm also very curious and overinvolved. So I have a lot of experience in overinvolved and overachievement, which in my life looked like playing softball for 16 years. I already mentioned I was choir president. I was also in National Honor Society. I went on missions trips with my church. I was in student council, beta club, drama club, youth group, worship leader, and literally that theme only continued into college. So you get the point. I spent a lot of years over involved to a point that was probably like not so awesome for me, but thankfully well, maybe not thankfully, I definitely learned probably the hard way that that's not the best. I think it was a combination of being curious and wanting to try all these things, but also mixed with probably my perfectionism and my need to like do more and achieve more. And those two things together were just not an awesome combination. But regardless, I'm very experienced at being over involved and doing a lot of things. Which leads to the next one. I am a gold medalist, if that existed. If that was in the Olympics, you'd catch me as a gold medalist in perfectionism, which has served me well, right, in so many categories. I had a near perfect GPA in high school. I graduated with honors in college, and I got really good at predicting the needs of people around me. Specifically, I can remember predicting what my boss was going to ask of me before he ever asked, and that happened probably 9 times out of 10. And so it made for a really great employee, and I looked really awesome at my job. But I also started to learn, unfortunately, again, the hard way, that also took a toll on my mental health and honestly my physical health, because for a large portion of my life I shied away from having any real relationships because I was afraid of not being perfect and having other people see that I wasn't perfect. And so the only way to maintain that perfectionism was to just not really have many close relationships. I also, like I said, stress about picking a nail color and a parking spot. So small decisions are hard for me. And it was also very hard for me in corporate America, where we are already in a situation of doing a lot of work in more than 40 hours a week. And I was striving for perfection, which led to a very dangerous spot, unfortunately, for me of continuing to strive more and nobody stopping me from doing that. And so that, spoiler alert, led to a lot of anxiety and burnout and high functioning depression. So I do have experience in, unfortunately, those things. And my years of striving and perfectionism led me to a place of realizing that I couldn't do it all, or really actually I couldn't do anything worth anything without God as a part of the equation. So that's a big part of my experience and my story. But jumping back for a second, I do obviously have experience in corporate America. We've talked about that a couple times now. That's why we're doing this entire executive summary, which I would like to just clarify that an executive summary in an actual presentation is meant to not be this long. So before you get the wrong idea, we're just using the structure, maybe not the actual execution of it, but just in case you were curious, it's usually not like a 40-minute conversation. We're just making it into one because I could talk forever. So I was in corporate America. I spent the last 7 or so years in consulting / sales, and that has brought me a lot of experience in communication, leadership, PowerPoint graphics. If you know, you know. Big PowerPoint girl. I used to think that I was good at PowerPoint exiting college until I joined the workforce, and it was a rude awakening that I actually had no idea what I was doing. But happy to say, or at least I think so, now that I can make a really killer PowerPoint. So if you're looking for some help, you let me know. You know where to come. And lastly, got really good at storytelling in a sales situation. I realized that is a really strong skill set of mine and something that I really enjoyed as a part of my job. Something else that came out of my corporate America experience is this idea that anytime I have a point of view on something, I will typically say it as a list. And so I think I've probably already done it in this podcast already. I'm interested to listen back and hear if that's true. But I think I either talk in numbered lists, so I'll say first this, second this, or I'll say A, this, B, this, as if you were making like bullet points. That's how my brain has become wired. I don't think it started out that way. I don't think I used to do that before 7 years in corporate America, where we're constantly making lists, constantly trying to summarize things, constantly trying to tell our point of view to somebody else in a really succinct way. I have just noticed that I start doing that, or I will just do it. I started a long time ago. I will just do it in any situation. And people have asked, do you think about that before you say it? Like, do you think, here's the list I'm going to say, and then you start speaking? And the answer is no. That's the crazy part, is that I will just know that I have a point of view and I'll immediately start attaching numbers to it because I immediately know, maybe based on myself, that I just have more to say. I have more than one thing to say. So the odds are it's going to be at least 3, if not more things to say. So that's something that you can expect also from this podcast. But the last portion of my experience is experience with Jesus. And I've touched on this a couple times already, but I was raised in church and I was saved at a young age. But despite how successful, quote unquote, my life has looked from the outside, I am not proud to say that most of my life I relied on my own strength and my own striving, and that I did not depend on or really know Jesus. But I'm happy to share that once I made it to the end of myself and the end of my own strength, that place of desperation and exhaustion is exactly where I found Jesus more clearly than I have ever seen him before. He was right there waiting for me with arms open, ready to welcome me back in. And he was there the whole time. I think, life and my own striving got in the way, but I'm happy to share that he's there, and he was there for me, and getting to know him more deeply over the last 5 years or so has been one of the greatest joys of my life. So that's a little bit about my experience and my credentials in life over the last almost 30 years. Hey friends, just me here, interrupting today's episode to share with you my recently published end-of-year guided reflection journal called Fruitful Reflections. And this work for me was produced out of a season where I was wrestling with God, and I found a love for journaling as a way to process my emotions and document my prayers. So if you're looking for a way to reflect on the fruit that was produced in your life in the previous season, as well as begin planting seeds for the year ahead, then I hope you'll check out Fruitful Reflections. If you want to learn more, the link will be in the show notes, as well as the Yalt Instagram bio, so you can check it out there and learn more about it. Thanks so much. Back to the episode. So that brings us to now and why it matters and why I start a podcast. So if you know me, then you know very well that I have been talking about starting this podcast for over a year now. I have had this equipment that you're seeing or hearing or experiencing this podcast with. I've had all the equipment for 6 months now, and I actually recorded a version of this very episode months ago, and I never released it. And so if I'm honest, this question of why it matters was one of the biggest barriers for me, and honestly, maybe it still is, of releasing this podcast and really starting this podcast and being full in and fully passionate about it. Because if I'm honest, there's a large part of my heart that still feels like it isn't the perfect time to start a podcast because I don't have the perfect story to tell. And you can guess that that's my perfectionism speaking. And so that has been one of the biggest barriers. And so after recording the first episode and trying to interview somebody and that not working out right, there was a huge wave of discouragement, thoughts of, why am I doing this? Does this really matter? Does anybody care to know about my story? Like, what do I really have to say that's important? Because it's not perfect. Because when I envisioned starting a podcast, I envisioned starting to share my journey from a place of joy and hope, and starting to share from a place of having a new career, healing my mental health, healing my body, and sharing from the other side of the journey that the Lord is faithful and see what he's done in my life. And as I look around, things still very much so feel very imperfect. And instead of having a new career, I am waiting on the Lord's guidance for what's next. And I have grown and recovered so much on my mental health journey, but some days it still feels like I have a long way to go, and it still feels hard. And I've spent years and I've tried so many strategies and seen so many doctors to help heal my body without much success. And although I've seen some progress and some small glimmers of light in that journey, most days it just feels like a lost cause, if I'm honest. And so for some reason, that story, my story, didn't seem like good enough or important enough to share with the world. And so it has been honestly a big barrier for me in wanting to record this episode, thinking that it's good enough to re-record, rewrite, release, etc. And I have put it down for an indefinite amount of time. But I was reminded of a few things recently that has given me the courage to return back to it, to record this episode, to hopefully release this episode, and to overall overcome that lie of why it matters, and maybe it doesn't. But the first of those things is that a story can be just as impactful or even more impactful when it's told from within the season of waiting versus on the other side of provision. Because there's something, I would hope you would agree, there's something that's uniquely powerful about choosing to believe and declare that the Lord is good. Or even if you're not a follower of Jesus, there's something so powerful of sitting in a season of waiting and choosing to believe in hope and joy while you're in the season of waiting, because it's so much easier on the other side of the story to say, like, look, I have a new job, look, I healed my body, look, I used to have anxiety and depression, but I don't anymore. And that is such a great story, and there's so much to celebrate in that as well. But I think equally, there's so much to be learned and so much to celebrate within the journey itself. And so that's something that I was reminded of recently, and what has given me the courage to start. Something else that I was reminded of recently is that there is something so uniquely relatable about sharing in suffering together, because even though we may not have the same story or the same journey, we might not have ever experienced the same pain or struggle in this life, but I can definitely say that we've all experienced pain and struggle in some way. And although our life sometimes on Instagram looks like a highlight reel of all of the best things, if it was only that, then we would never get to see the pain and the brokenness that others are walking through all around us. And we would never be able to support each other or relate to each other or feel like we're not alone in that struggle. And that is something that's so important, and to tell that story has to happen in the middle of it sometimes, and maybe not on the other side. And the third thing that I learned recently that I think really relates to the name of this podcast is that if you're a follower of Jesus, then you know our story will never be perfect until we are reunited with God in eternity, that this world is inherently broken and imperfection exists all around us every day, and brokenness and pain and suffering will be a part of our story until we are resurrected just like Jesus was and made new again. And so to wait until things are perfect to share a story, or to wait until things are perfect to share of the goodness and the faithfulness of the Lord, we are going to be waiting our entire lives for that, because it's never going to be perfect. And yes, the Lord is faithful still within that, and He is still good, and there are still goodness and joy and hope to share even within the waiting and within the struggle and within the pain. And so things are just not going to be perfect. So if I'm waiting to share my own story until things are perfect, then I'm going to be waiting forever. And I don't think that's what I'm called to do, or what we're called to do as followers of Christ. And so I think there's also just a lot of hope and purpose and joy to be found in the midst of trials, because we still have hope that we actually can live twice if you're a follower of Jesus and you believe and have given your life to Him, and that death isn't the end of our story. And I think there's so much hope there. And so as I use this platform to share the stories and the joy and the hope, but also in the pain and the suffering from those around me, I hope that you will also join me on a journey of continuing to tell my own story, even if it isn't perfect. So for now, that's a wrap on episode 1. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you learned a little bit more about me, and I hope that you'll stick around and hear more. So thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.